Hi. So I've been toying with different ideas of what I wanted to do for this. I kind of wanted to start with season 1 of the Magnus Archives and go from there and talk about each season, because I absolutely adore the Magnus Archives. But I think I want to start with season 4 and then work my way from there, because that's what's going to motivate me a lot more. Hi, my name is David. I am a biology major and a creative writing minor. I'm about to graduate from the University of Central Florida in about tomorrow, as the day of recording this. So, I'm taking a gap year from school because I didn't get into any master's programs I wanted. We're not going to go into that right now. Anyways, I absolutely adore the Magnus Archives. For those of you who don't know, the Magnus Archives is a horror podcast produced by Rusty Quill. It's set in the UK, so it may or may not exist. And it's a horror podcast written by Jonathan Sims, and it deals with a alternate universe in a way where our fears are actual entities with power and control over our lives, and it starts as this anthology series of small snippets of horror that leads to a larger, grander plot. And I started listening. I always say I start watching this, but it's like I can imagine it in my mind. I started listening to the Magnus Archives last year in the summer, and I didn't finish until January or February of this year. I took some breaks in between there. Changed my life. I listened to it again once more, and right now I'm on my third listen through, but this time I'm randomly drawing an episode. Like, I text my friends or I text my boyfriend and I tell them, give me a number between 1 and 200, and they give me a number, and that's what I listen to, because I'm love this show a lot. But so I wanted to record and talk about Magnus Archives because I just want to put my thoughts out there, because I think that Magnus Archives should be listened to by everyone who loves horror. And I think it's a great example of great writing, great direction, great acting. And as a creative writing minor myself, I'm hopefully going to go into a creative writing major sometime in the next few years, rounding that out for me. This series has really transformed me in such profound ways, and I just want to talk about it. If I were to rank Magnus Archives seasons, all 5 seasons, from best to worst, this is going to be controversial. I understand. It's fine. I would do season 4 is the best for me. Season 2, 3, 1, and 5, I think. Actually, okay. I think 1 and 2 can be switched around. Just, season 4 is just the best for me. And I really wanted to talk about why season 4 is so strong for me. And I'm not saying that the other 4 seasons are not good. They're all amazing. And I think that the entire collection of 200 episodes is just amazing. It's just that season 4 has a special little place for me. I will say right now that my favorite episode is episode 47, which is The New Door with Helen Richardson. And it's the first introduction of Michael. That episode terrified me when I first watched it. It's my favorite episode. It's because of that I want to read House of Leaves, because they seem very similar. That's my favorite episode. But season 4 is my favorite season. So there's nuance here. So let's talk about it. Okay, I put on a sweater because it got colder in here and because it got darker outside. No relation. Anyways, first off, spoiler alert for the entirety of the Magnus Archives. You have been warned. The episode titles that you will see up here, they'll be from the Magnus Archives fan wiki. Some episodes have like art to them that I find really cool, so I kept them and they're like credited right below it, so you'll see who did it. Support local artists. Great. Okay. So I was going to do episode by episode, and I started writing, and I got up to like 127. I was like, this is gonna take a long ass time, and it's gonna be a lot of the same. So I started writing more towards like types of arcs that occurred in season 4 that I really enjoyed, and it's in no particular order besides general chronological order. So things like they sort of fit in order, but anyways, we're just going to talk about those, and I'll be mentioning episodes within there. I'll be going to cover the arcs because season 4 really covers so much. Like, season 4 is so dense in how much things are happening that I sort of tried my best to like separate them in sort of like arcs in a way, and I'm not covering every single episode, but most episodes are going to be appearing, and yeah, so just to begin, I'm going to start talking about post-unknowing John. So, season 4 has a really soft spot in my heart because of many different things, one of which is we can see John grappling with the actions after the unknowing, specifically Tim and Daisy's deaths, or at least Tim's death and Daisy's perceived death. We also first start hearing John refer to himself as the archivist, which is what other avatars have called him, or what other people within the fear circles have called him. John first begins to refer himself as the archivist in episode 122, A Zombie, instead of referring to himself as the head archivist of the Magnus Institute, which sort of marks the start of John's ascent further into being an avatar of the Eye. John's been having these powers of beholding for like some time prior. Around season 3 is when he starts figuring out his powers, and season 4 is when it's more prevalent, and you can see this when he starts forcing statements out of people, such as in 141, Doomed Voyage, with that one random sailor guy who was in Mikhail Salace's ship, as well as 142 in Scrutiny, where some random woman comes up and he's like, hey, so this guy accosted me and made me tell him about one time I got almost eaten by the buried, and Martin's like, oh, that's my ex-boyfriend. But you can see that John has some modicum of power that he's forcing onto people to feed, and we see him feeding off statements multiple times prior. He also starts exercising a lot of his power of just knowing stuff. Like we saw in, I should have written it down, in the episode where Jerry Key is in the hospital. He like knows the safe combination for like something in the hospital. That sort of power. John begins expressing that power a lot more. Two notable moments I just remember, they're not like super notable, it's just the ones I remember, is like in Zombie, how he knew that Basira had that statement in her bag. Like, how did he know that he knew that? As well as knowing that it was Basira at the door in 127 remains to be seen. And she didn't knock, she was just waiting outside, and he was like, oh yes, you may come in. She's like, I'm waiting until you finish. And so he just kind of knows that stuff. He like chooses to know that stuff, and I forget exactly where, but it talks about to Basira how when it's like a door is holding back a lot of water, and every once in a while some water trickles out, and she asks what happens if the door opens, and he says, I drown. Amazing stuff. So either way, around this time, pretty early on in the season, we begin to see our protagonist growing his power and even grapple with his perceived inhumanity because of it. A little later, I'll talk about like him comparing himself to other avatars and other people that use these powers, these horror entities. And honestly, at the beginning of season 4 and throughout the season 4, it's a great departure from the John we see in prior seasons, where like before he's like just kind of like a bumbling archivist who doesn't know what's going on around him, to someone who's actually actively like seeking out this information, which I will talk about in a bit. But yeah, in the very beginning of season 4, John is flexing his muscles and being someone powerful, and that's really fun to experience. Melanie and the slaughter. All of Melanie's statements prior to season 4 surrounded being confronted with like slaughter remnants. She researched a lot of war ghosts, and I think she went to like India or something and got shot by a ghost bullet, and they checked her x-ray and they're like, you don't have a bullet inside you, ma'am, stop being crazy. And she's like, I got shot. And so she, goes to the institute and talks about it. In 123 web development, it's revealed that Melanie near single-handedly defended the institute when Jared Hopworth and Agents of the Flesh attacked. Like, I think it was mentioned that she took like a knife and just like single-handedly like attacked people, which is super badass, first of all, and second of all, what knife? Just any random knife, or was it an artifact? That was never explained. I figured there was some sort of an artifact, because how can a normal knife just like kill a bunch of flesh agents? But wasn't really explained. But anyways, when John returns from the hospital, she is openly hostile to him, and she's like, she doesn't trust him, she doesn't believe that it's him, that he's been replaced by a monster or whatever. It kind of has been replaced by a monster, but whatever. She's very angry. And Basira mentions how Melanie has just degenerated, basically, into this state, and it's only within 125 civilian casualties. A really good. Do I talk about this a little bit later? It's a really good statement. It's a really good episode. Whatever. Only after witnessing that statement does John start thinking about the slaughter, and he knows that her ghost bullet is like a ghost bullet that has a bunch of slaughter. So he and Basira secretly remove the bullet from her. She gets angry, stabs John with a scalpel. That's important for later. And I think he said that it was pumping the slaughter into her, which is so cool. So like after that, she like calms down and she begins to like sort of advocate. She goes to therapy. She decides to cold quit, soft quit. What's that thing that boomers say that people are doing now for not doing 100% of their 110% of work? And it's like she begins to push to leave, which is a very interesting thing, because we see with all the other characters, they're sort of there and they accept that they are in this world and they accept that they have to do something. Melanie, in contrast, does not want this. Melanie wants to get out. As John learned in 154 Bloody Mary, that Eric Delano was able to escape the eye by blinding himself. He tells her that in 155 Cost of Living, and she blinds herself to escape the eye and to escape the entities, which has like further consequences in season 5. But season 4, that is like everyone learns this, that you can blind yourself, and that's how you get out of the entity's power influence. And she does it, and that's like, I would not have expected that she would do that, I would expect like they would find something else or whatever, or like John said, like, we'll find another way to escape the eye. And she's like, no need, I'll do what I need to do. And she I think she like hole punches her eyes out or something. I'm not sure, they're British. But it's really such like an amazing moment for her to be like, actually, I'm taking my life into my own hands, blinding myself, a very drastic move. And she's like, I would rather be blind than keep doing all this. And I think that is so interesting, and it makes sense. Like, it makes sense with her storyline and her character. So that is just really, really interesting and fun to witness, and horrifying to decide whether you need to get your eyes removed, or blinded at least, to escape a horror entity. Like, I wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, it's pretty cool to be part of the horror entity. Whatever. So Melanie's trajectory in the entire story has been trying to get ahead and survive from the entities and the horrors around her, and it did feel like a small tragedy for her to be slowly consumed by the slaughter without her knowing. Like, she's always been trying to stay away from it, and with that ghost bull inside her, she's been slowly been taken over by the slaughter, and that was kind of sad to see. It felt like a tragedy. It felt like she had her character, she had failed in her own mission, but by blinding herself, she pushed ahead of that, and that was really, really satisfying to witness. In 131 Flesh, she expresses how the bullet was helping her validate the anger that she had. She mentions how she built herself up from nothing, and so the bullet really helped her feel like that she was right to be angry, that she had to do all this, and she was right to be angry about everything that was happening in the world. And even if it was giving her, it was a negative impact, she relished in that feeling. After blinding herself, Melanie has found her escape, and her arc after the fact is a tragedy of how this world affects people, even those who actively run against it. Her arc in season 4 is very beautiful, very sad, very righteous to me. And even though she took a backseat for some of it, she decided to take a backseat from everything, and which is why she was not very prominent in mid season of season 4. Which fair, she's not wanting to do any of that, and it's very commendable. It's very commendable that she blinds herself to get out of that. You don't see that kind of commitment in stories anymore. At least, you don't see that kind of commitment so drastic in stories, usually. So, I love Melanie as a character, and I love the things that she goes through, that she causes in season 4. And it's very satisfactory seeing that all occur in season 4. Oh, I said prior that I enjoyed listening to John learn on his own, to flex his muscles, that he's gaining all these powers. And we saw in season 3 how a lot of statements that he was reading, specifically about the unknowing and other things, were statements that were sent to him by Elias. Now we see that he is exercising his power to find stuff his own way, and it's, for me, this is the first arc that this occurs in, that's more prevalent, is learning. I'm calling learning and the coffin. Easy and simple. So starting in 128 Heavy Goods, after John wrenches a statement from Breakin of Breakin and Hope fame, he sets himself on a mission to save Daisy from the coffin, which I remember listening to The Unknowing the first time, and I was like, I don't know what the bleep is happening here, but I love it. Second time around for The Unknowing, I was like, I'm gonna try to pay attention a bit more, and I still got, I got more than the first time, but it was still very much like, okay, this is interesting. I'm not getting most of it. The third time around, then I was like, oh, this is when this happens, this is when that happens, blah, 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 blah. And so I did not know that Daisy had been thrown into the coffin until Heavy Goods. Oh, so, the coffin. The coffin is this recurring artifact connected to the buried that has been interacted with multiple times in multiple statements. I believe it's in the second or third episode ever of Magnus Archives that it appears. Someone's going to read me because I don't know that. And it's been noted that anyone who enters the coffin never comes out. Basically, people walk into the coffin, and they're in the buried, which is terrifying. He learns that in Heavy Goods, and then the next subsequent episodes, he's learning about the buried. He's learning about the entities and what they can do, the limits of what they can do, and the limits of what people who are confronted by these things can do. In 129 Submerged, he learns about the intricacies of the buried, and there was the guy who was almost drowned, but he found his grandfather's tool that he loved his grandfather and was able to escape the buried because of that. And then in 130 meet, he learns about the last feast. We'll get back to the last feast, but he starts thinking about the flesh, and obviously in Submerged, you have just a random guy getting just randomly attacked by the buried, and he gets out by remembering his grandfather. This also parallels Lost in a Crowd. A woman goes to Europe and almost gets lost in a crowd for the lonely, but she meets Jerry Key, and Jerry Key's like, remember your mother, and she goes in there and remembers her mother and gets out of the lonely because of that. Also happens in Cul-de-sac. And so he's like, okay, this is random guy, random occurrence, random thing, but like, this is one the archivist to the coffin, which is the embodiment of the buried, and he has to have a more of an anchor, which is why he, connects these dots and makes his own decision to talk to Jared Hopworth in 131 Flesh. Shout out to Jared Hopworth lovers out there. I know you're out there. Jared Hopworth, who is trapped in Helen's hallways under the Institute. And, he learned he needed an anchor from Submerged, and he got an idea because of meat. And so he goes to Jared, and Jared takes two of John's ribs out, keeps one of them, and gives the other one to John to be his anchor. And then John, by his own volition, in 132 Entombed, goes into the coffin and gets Daisy out. And I remember I listened to this, the first time I listened to this, I was riding my bike, and it was one of the most terrifying episodes, because of the sound effects and the sounds that these two actors make. And then I'm just riding my bike, and then I hear the humming inside the coffin. I'm like, hello, what is this, to slaughter? And it was very terrifying, and it was so rewarding that John learns all this, uses his rib, uses a tape of Daisy's voice, and uses his own sheer luck to go into the buried and take Daisy out. And it's so rewarding to watch him use his resources and his powers to save Daisy. Later on in 135 Dark Matter, around the supplemental area, Basira goes to confront Elias because she was trying to figure out more stuff about the buried, and so he had sent her on missions to figure out stuff about the coffin, but in reality he was only sending her off on wild goose chases so that John could be stupid and go into the coffin himself. I just remember I was also riding my bike most of the time. Most of season 4 I had listened to while I was exercising. Elias said a line to Basira that shook me when I was driving my bike. He said, quote, "John has still achieved what no one mortal monster or anyone in between has ever been able to. He climbed out of the buried." Oh, amazing. But that is just an amazing example of sort of raising the stakes and showing a protagonist surpassing insurmountable odds in a way that no one really expected. John continues to surprise people in story, and in turn begins to surprise us audience, and that's such a great sort of writing aspect. Also, I hate the buried. I don't all the entities I love. The buried terrifies me in different ways, and other entities terrify me. The buried, hate it. So this arc was really something primal for me. For John to go into forever deep below creation and survive willingly, I would die. I would simply just Carolina Gorka it and just, sorry, I'm going to sleep now. Even though I can't sleep in there, I'd be like, So, yeah, that arc is really powerful for me, especially hearing it for the first time. So, I'm no longer cold. Anyways, So another thread that ended in season 4 that I was really excited to see was the story arc concerning the Dark, the Daedalus space station, and the ritual of the Dark, the extinguished sun. Concerning the Daedalus, we had prior episodes to this, A Matter of Perspective, 106, and checking my notes, 57, Personal Space, dealing with the vast and the lonely in that order. And now we have a sort of tying end of all of that. In Dark Matter, we learn what exactly Manuela Dominguez was doing in the Daedalus, as well as learning that there was a fourth astronaut, a nyctophobe, which used to fuel the creation of the Black Star. Nyctophobe is someone who's afraid of the dark, I learned. No, it's just listening to that statement and hearing that there is always a fourth person there, after hearing Chilcott and Kilbride both say, yeah, it was just the three of us. Like, terrifying. How did you hide a fourth person, Manuela? They didn't even explain how because she said that the nyctophobe was silenced somehow, and she does not know how Maxwell Rayner silenced him. I don't know either. We don't know. We never really find out. And so, yeah. But anyways, that was just terrifying to hear about. And it's a great sort of ending to what happened at the Daedalus. Why it happened in the first place, too, as well. In 140, Movement of the Heavens, we learned about the backstory of Maxwell Rayner and how he's just been reanimating himself multiple times. Now that I think of it, that's a little bit of foreshadowing, too, for Jonah Magnus, which I'll get to. But yes, that was very helpful, and also sends John and Basira to Nye Alisund in Doomed Voyage. In 143, Heart of Darkness, that's when John and Basira meet Manuela and get an actual life statement from her and learn that the ritual for the Dark, the extinguished sun, was going underway, and it was probably one of the most complex sort of rituals that was going on to bring in one of the fear entities. And that it just sort of collapsed in and of itself. And Manuela kept blaming Gertrude Robinson, and who was the former archivist, and she kept saying it was Gertrude's fault, but she never knew. And she was like, yeah, everything just started falling apart, and everyone was like, oh my god, everyone started infighting, and she thought it was Gertrude Robinson. But no, it wasn't, because John and Basira tell her that Gertrude had died prior to the very end of that ritual, and so that was all very confusing. That sets up a very small mystery of what ended the ritual with the Dark, because prior to that we sort of like seen with the unknowing, the great twisting, that Gertrude specifically did something to stop those rituals. Now, John and Basira were like, well, she didn't really do anything because she died before the end of that. But Manuela's like, well, it ended somehow, so something must have happened. And so that sort of question, like, did Gertrude do something, or what might have stopped the ritual? That mystery was just all of a sudden presented to us, and we're like, that is a very interesting question, you know? And so that sort of idea keeps remarking upon, and I'll be mentioning it a bit more because it leads up to the everything. We'll get there. But, you know, this Extinguished Sun arc only encompassed like 3 or 4 episodes, and it passed really quickly, very small amount of space as well, but it does set up the concept of failed rituals and the question of why, which leads to very organically to the finale. But I'll get to that later. So, the arc concerning the Scored Earth, the ritual for the desolation, is really impactful.
Hi, Editing David here. So I keep saying Scored Earth instead of Scoured Earth. That's the real pronunciation, Scoured Earth. I could have just listened to the episode again and remembered what it was called, but I didn't. So, I keep saying Scored Earth, and we're just going to move past that. It is pronounced Scoured Earth.
And only for being 2 episodes, which is striking, because Agnes Montague is very much a fan favorite, despite not getting any vocal statements from her. I really wish that we had like a statement from the Agnes Montague, but unfortunately that just didn't happen. Whatever. Either way, the 2 episodes that surround the cult of the Lightless Flame and Agnes is conception and later death are really like beautiful to me, and beautiful depictions of a martyr and their inner turmoil. It really ties a neat bow in Agnes's story, and honestly does leave a lot wanting, but not in a bad way. Not in a bad way. Like these episodes also bring in the question and idea of rituals for the entities. Like, we don't really know exactly what the ritual of Scored Earth is, but we know it dealt with Agnes. We don't know that Agnes was gonna probably burn everything down. But we didn't really get much of that. But that's not the important part. The important part was Agnes as a character and what she meant to the world and what she meant to herself and what she did or couldn't do. John begins to wonder what, Gertrude did to stall Agnes, as well as sort of ruminating on how Agnes and other avatars came about, as he begins to doubt his own humanity. Also, it's a great tie-in, honestly, to like earlier seasons, because Arthur Nolan is a cult member who is mentioned to be Jane Prentice's landlord in season 1 or 2. I don't remember any of that in season 1 or 2, because I just didn't, I'm not listening to names that early. But after the second and third listen, I'm like, oh, that's Arthur Nolan, so it's a great tie-in. It's a great example of oh yeah, this thing in season 4 was all the way mentioned in season 1, which is really interesting. Either way, it's a fun little addition there. These two episodes lead into each other very, very well, but they're separated by several statements, which is interesting, which it felt at the time of listening very deliberate in that, we're tying up storylines here. And the thing is, because these two felt very tie-in bow, we're finishing Agnes's storyline, this one, along with The Dark and other ones I'm going to mention, started this weird feeling in me. It was feeling of oh, okay, there's something going on. We're wrapping up storylines so that they don't crop up, so something is going to happen, and I don't know what. And that sort of ride was there, and I was really excited to witness all of that. So yeah, Chosen and Infectious Doubts, really great writing. All episodes are really great writing, but those two are really, really good. Another thing that season 4 did, which I had a lot of fun with, was depicting the other rituals. So we definitely hear from Jerry Key in 111. I'll correct myself if I'm wrong. Family Business, that the entities have rituals to bring them about, and we definitely learn about the Great Twisting, and of course the Unknowing. Which ones did we also talk about beforehand? There are a handful of others. Either way, we didn't get all of them. We saw no one talks about the pit. You guys remember that episode? The episode that Nikola Orzhanov appears right after and is that popular audio on TikTok? This is a really great episode, especially because we don't talk about the pit. Is the buried, the sunken sky. That's it. Giant Kilbride. Cut up, tossed in there. We also learned, forgot about that. We also learned that Gertrude Robertson had killed Jan Kilbride, chopped him up, threw him into the pit, and stopped the ritual, which was really interesting to learn. I think that was in Submerge or something. Either way, we didn't get much of rituals in the prior seasons. Season 4 was just a smorgasbord of rituals, which was really cool. So first, we sort of round out information in 126 Sculptor's Tools by showing the build-up to the Great Twisting with the worker of clay that was mentioned in Michael's statement in 101, the Great Twisting. Nope. In 101, another twist. Where, to be honest, this statement felt slightly out of place, because most of the build-up for the Unknowing occurred before the reveal of how it was going to go. And since this episode and another twist where Michael detailed the Great Twisting is separated by nearly half a season, it felt disconnected. However, I can understand why it was placed here, because this information is not important to the story at that time. We did not need to know who the worker of clay was in Michael's statement. Side fact: have you guys seen heard the blooper of him saying, "Oh, the worker of clay labeled for decades"? Anyways, I felt disconnected, but I can see why it was here. At this point, along with the last part of Agnes' storyline, felt like another instance of, oh no, things are beginning to wrap up, something is about to happen, which I like a lot. It's very, like, I don't know exactly what to call it, but it's definitely very much deliberate of, like, okay, we know there's something coming. The writers are like, we know there's something coming, we have to tie up things. But we, the audience, we're like, we don't know what's going to happen, but we're tying up all these loose ends. It's a really cool feeling as I was binge listening to this. Mind you, I only listened to the Magnus Archives like a year or two after season 5 came out. Either way, it was still very fun to have this feeling of like there is something coming, because we are now all of a sudden finishing the discussion about the Great Twisting and Agnes and other rituals. So the other rituals, right? I like that a lot. Then we get to the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park. Sorry, I mean The Last Feast. The episode in 130 Meet. It's terrifying. It's scary. The way that it's written, it's scary. But then you take a few steps backwards, you think about it, and it's just a pit with meat. There's a pit of meat over there. Let's blow it up. That's what Gertrude did to stop it. Either way, learning about that, very fun, very interesting. You know, it was kind of funny, but I swear to God, listening to that, it was terrifying, because that pit of meat was eating stuff, because meat is meat. Anyways, then we get into my two most favorite rituals, I have to say. The Ever Chase in 133 Dead Horse. It's a personal favorite of mine. And it's an interesting twist to a ritual, especially one of the hunt, because we heard from, I forget who it was, that these rituals are happening and that the web and the end don't do rituals. I think that's later, actually. Either way, we know that there's rituals for these entities. And we're like, okay, we need a ritual for the hunt. And what is the hunt? It is the fear of chase. And it feels very interesting that this is a ritual that is working, but will never end. Because if it ends, that means the fear of being chased has been met. You've been caught. And that's a very interesting concept. And so the Ever Chase is really cool. Also, I had also recently watched The Terror on HBO, and it mentioned Franklin Crozier. And I'm also reading another Dan Simmons book, The Abominable. And it was a great surprise. It was a great surprise to listen to. Be like, oh my God, I know that man. Either way, Ever Chase, really interesting, really fun. Dead Horse, really fun. It's fun statement, especially coming off of 132, Entombed. Like, they just got out of the tomb, and then John's, let's get back to it. Kudos to you, old man. Anyways, my absolute favorite is The Risen War in 137 Nemesis, which I feel is like a soft sequel to 105 Total War. I don't really remember Total War that much, but I love 137 Nemesis. I adore The Slaughter. The Slaughter is one of my favorites. I feel it's underrated in the fandom. And I like the idea that it's music, Grifter's Bone, hello. But it also brings in the question of how rituals fail, because there was no apparent cause of failure. The slaughter agents were on the Nemesis waiting for something to happen, and all these people were killing each other, and then nothing happened. They were sad. And I remember in the statement, the person who's giving the statement said, "What struck me," I'm not quoting this right now, but it's around the same. He said something along the lines of, "What struck me was how sad they looked. Not the fear, not the music. It was how sad the agents of the slaughter were." And that was very interesting. And Gertrude also does question if other entities interrupted or stopped the ritual, which is a very interesting sort of thing. It's a great bit of foreshadowing there too as well, because she is starting to think about these rituals and how they work and how they don't work. So I really like that a lot. Then we're going to start going down a bit with 151, Big Picture. Simon Fairchild vaguely mentions the Awful Deep, but doesn't fully describe what it is, besides using a diving belt and sacrifices. It's sort of funny that he mentions that it was not a good idea anyways. And even more interestingly, he lays out how avatars don't really know what they're doing for rituals. Actually, before I say that, it's sort of funny how he himself mentions that the ritual wasn't a good idea, and also that he might think of redoing a ritual in the future based in space, which Kilbride did that. Anyways. But he also, interestingly, lays out how avatars don't really know what they're doing for rituals. He says, quote, "Imagine you are deaf, but every night you hear the most beautiful music in your dreams, and your every waking thought is consumed by trying to replicate this music. Oh, you're mute as well in this analogy, or at least you can't sing. And you need to invent the idea of a musical instrument from scratch. Everyone else is also deaf and mute." Which I think is a very, beautiful concept in this, horrifying story. Just a beautiful way to describe how avatars and people who are influenced by the fears see these rituals. Peter Lucas also details the silence in 159, The Last, which feels the most elaborate besides the Unknowing and the Extinguished Sun, because he had to build a whole building and make it all look normal, but it's not. It's an evil building. Whatever. All these rituals are pretty elaborate. I don't know. The silence just hit me really hard for some reason, and it just helped me realize how scary the lonely truly can be. Because being a college student, having that sort of feeling of I'm alone, that really hit it. Also, COVID. We're not going to talk about that. Anyways, also the fact that Gertrude literally stopped it by tipping off a newspaper about the building he built. That's just comedy. Another side note, the Magnus Archives does a great job balancing humor with horror sometimes when needed. I remember, this is also about the lonely, the one widow of that one Lucas child that gets lost in the lonely, and she's has that stone that says Forsaken on it, and she's running, and then she kind of stops, and John says, "That's when you got hit by a car." Hilarious. Hilarious. Anyways, lastly, the Watcher's Crown, which was name dropped, I believe, in Family Business, is finally revealed in 160. The Eye Opens, and it's a fun sort of of course moment, because we've learned that there's a panopticon under the Institute. We learned about Millbank Prison a while back, and so obviously, the panopticon was the attempt. And the subsequent failure of the Watcher's Crown was also really interesting to learn about. So, throughout all of these statements, the idea of how a ritual fails is constantly brought up, which is great foreshadowing in plain sight, and sort of that thing of okay, let's lay out all the rest of the rituals that we don't know about. And there it is for you guys. The only ones we don't really know about, or don't have, obviously the web and the End don't have rituals. The Extinction's not strong enough to have a ritual. And the Corruption, there was no ritual really mentioned, except for whatever Jane Prentice's worms were doing. So it was still very interesting to hear the rounding out all of the other rituals in season 4. Now we're going to talk about the Extinction, because the Extinction is really important to season 4, obviously. If you've read it, if you've listened to the Magnus Archives, the Extinction is a secret 15th power that begins to appear, or has been beginning to appear, and we start exploring that. And honestly, when I first learned about the Extinction, when I first started listening to these statements about the Extinction, I was like, I don't get it. I don't get it. But then the more I think about it, the more I see it, I get it. I love the Extinction. learning when I'm learning about writing stories, I've always heard about rising stakes and power creep. And I think The Extinction is a great example of this because we are presented with all these 14 entities, and even though it was just like detailed out for us in Family Business, but we've experienced all of these for a while now. The Extinction is a great example of sort of power creep in a way, or at least rising stakes. I'm not fully sure which one it is, but it's one of those, I think. So like a new element to a story that sort of drives the stakes up, presents new challenges, and threatens current trends is a thing that happens in stories that you need to progress a story and keep it living. And Extinction is a great example of this. All of the Extinction episodes are amazing, which, you know, for all the 14 entities, there's some flops in there. Extinction, all of the Extinction episodes, tight. From 134, Time of Revelation, with the weird world that the woman finds herself in because of the Hillarites, to 144, Decrypted, with the reoccurring signals, the portent of humanity's doom in that guy's mind. It's terrifying. Very, like, he mentions the reoccurring Russian radio signals that, like, repeat stuff that no one really knows what it's about. Very, you know, spy-wise. To 149, Concrete Jungle. I think Concrete Jungle's my favorite because it's sort of that poignant example of, like, what happens to excess and to trash. Very, very fun. To 156, Reflection, with its depiction of, like, human consuming things that want to consume us. They're all amazing. So all of the official Extinction statements are good and serve as a very fun goal that Martin is working towards. I haven't really talked about Martin because I feel like the Martin storyline, I don't feel equipped to talk about it for some reason. I'm not convinced by it, which is why I'm not really talking about it, but it's a really good aspect, which is why I'm including Martin and Peter Lucas within the Extinction sort of section. So, Martin learning about the Extinction feels very akin to John learning to save Daisy and learning about the Black Star, where he's consuming all this stuff, he's trying to learn things, and watching characters grow and learn is a very important integral aspect to making a story feel alive and feel relatable to an audience, and so that was very, very smart to do. Also, the introduction of the Extinction allows for some holes to be filled elsewhere, which is very fun. Episodes like 5 Thrown Away, with the bag of teeth in the trash. 65 Binary. I swear I'm going to make a video about Binary. If I make this video first. Anyways, it's Binary, terrifying. 114 Cracked Foundation with Hilltop Road, and 122 Zombie, which happened in season 4, have all been, like, retroactively tied to Extinction, at least according to the wiki. And I kind of do see it. It does feel cheap, however, for the Extinction to be revealed as a lie, in a way, to manipulate Martin. Like, Peter and Elias know that the Extinction's not powerful enough. I'm still confused about that, honestly. But it was like in 157 Rotten Core, it was revealed that Adelard Decker was like, actually, it's not that strong enough, so we have some time. But anyways, it was still rewarding to see it come to life in 175 Epoch. So, just in general, despite it, you know, it's still an interesting rising of stakes, power creep, whatever you want to call it. And also, a really good red herring, because it really fooled all of us, and was still an interesting concept to grapple with, an idea to grapple with. I love the Extinction. So, when I look at John in season 4, a lot of it is him starting to grapple with his inhumanity, which is where we get into Helen and all the other avatars that are mentioned. As mentioned before with Agnes, John witnesses several statements that talk about other avatars. He's already had a conversation with Jude Perry and Mike Crew, as well as Michael Distortion. Jane Prentice's statement, he's already been doing this. In season 4, we get a new crop of avatars that are really interesting. Helen in 146 Threshold shows, in his conversation with Helen, shows how much he worries about his hunger and his humanity, and Helen only really wants him to push for it or risk dying. She knows, I think she knows, that he's been going out and consuming other statements, from live statements, for health reasons. Health reasons, as if he has, like, a sickness. No, he is a sickness. The eye is a sickness. Anyways. And so, like, Helen's pushing that, and you see he starts looking at Helen as, like, oh, she used to be a human, but now she has let herself debase herself to be consuming fear off of people that fear the spiral. And so he starts seeing her as, like, oh, she's a monster. Does that make me a monster for wanting to eat? Which is very interesting sort of ideas to grapple about. We also get a bunch of mentions of Annabelle Kane, like in web development, and in 136 The Puppeteer, along with her official statement in 147 Weaver. Like, it shows that she is definitely doing stuff in the background, and very insidious stuff with the web, which is highlighted in Weaver. But of course, the story continues to season 5, and so it's similar, but sort of opposite in the way for tying up the bows for the rituals. And Agnes is that, like, I knew that Annabelle would be important in season 5 when I started season 5 early on, because her story was not completed within season 4. Like, everything within season 4 concerning Annabelle Kane was very much like, oh yeah, she's evil. Spider-Woman, be careful. And so I was like, okay, season 5, I know she's going to be very important. Which I guess is sort of what they wanted to do, which was very interesting to witness. Along with Helen and Annabelle, we also get some one-off avatars, or at least people influenced by these powers, that John sort of begins to ruminate about. The two that come to mind are Hezekiah Wakely in 152 The Grave Digger's Envy, who is an underrated king in my opinion, as well as Tove McHugh in 155 Cost of Living, who are, like, great examples of people consumed by the entities that use them to their advantage, that, you know, along with Helen, John looks at and compares himself to. With Hezekiah Wakely, John sort of, like, looks at him and starts thinking about being an avatar, and, like, what does it mean to do things for a power, and does Hezekiah realize this, or is he just lost in it? And obviously Tove doesn't recognize that it's some form of power, but she's still using the end to get her own means. A means to an end. Anyways. They are just great examples of avatars, one-off avatars that John sort of, like, looks at and compares himself to. These internal thoughts are spoken out loud, and we see how deep John is getting to the eye, and how deep the eye is getting to John, and how far John is willing to go to the eye. Because he starts doubting, is he human or is he not? When did he stop becoming human? When did he start being consumed by the eye? And so, you know, Helen, Annabelle, Hezekiah, and Tove are the top, like, those are the 4 that I really point to in this season, that I'm like, that John really looks at and examines, which is very interesting. Now I'm going to sort of talk about overarching arcs in a way. More overarching arcs. Concerning Basira and Daisy, these two take a very interesting role in this season. From the beginning, Basira is alone. She thinks that she's without Daisy. She thinks that Daisy has died. And she, in my eyes, she sort of has taken control of the Institute in John's absence, despite Peter Lucas being there. But she's like, she is now the point of contact for most of the people there who are still alive, that being Martin and Melanie, and Helen, tangentially. When John comes back from his coma, she's very antagonistic towards him. She no longer trusts him fully, and starts seeing him not so much as a human and more of a monster, or at least is trying to grapple with the idea, is he human or is he monster? It's very hard for her to do that. And she admits that Gertrude's actions, while morally and comprehensively wrong, is that the right term? Actually did get stuff done, and so far, Basira has seen that Gertrude's the only one who's been able to do this sort of stuff. And John's not doing that. So she frequently meets with Elias, which feels very underhanded to John, which I love. And starts taking leads from Elias, which leads her to get manipulated by him, obviously, which caused John to get marked by the Buried and the Dark, among other things happening. Basira is a very complicated character, and she gets even more complicated this season, which I absolutely adore. I think Basira is an amazing character. I kind of want to make a video about why she's the best character in the Magnus Archives. We're getting ahead of ourselves. But I've seen so many people dislike her in this season for this reason. And while I agree that she may have been written a little too angrily, it still makes sense with the story. Like, she's survived by her own sheer will and strength and intelligence. Like, she's allowed to be a little bit pissed off that John had a coma by getting hit by rocks. Like, she walked out of the unknowing, not knowing what is knowing, and she is now part of the Institute. Like, she's allowed to be angry, you know? And it still makes sense with the story. And I enjoy that a lot, you know? Daisy, on the other hand, goes through a large transformation after getting saved from the Buried, which is also very fun to watch. I don't know why I said on the other hand. Like, comparing? No, they, like, Basira and Daisy and Melanie, all of the characters in season 4 get amazing arcs to them, you know, which is why I love this season. Daisy, we're going to talk about Daisy here. Okay, so she goes through a large transformation as when she's in the Buried, the hunt no longer fuels her, no longer powers her, and so she grapples with her power and the actions she's done as a hunter. Small tangent. I went to ride my bike today, and I asked my boyfriend to give me 4 random numbers from 1 to 200 to listen to as I do my exercise, and the last 2 were 132, Entombed, and 178, The Processing Line. And those 2 episodes talked about Basira and Daisy, and specifically Daisy's inner turmoil, which is what kind of inspired this video, because I wanted to talk about Daisy, and then I expanded into wanting to talk about season 4 and how good it was. So, Daisy starts talking about in the coffin. She talks about she does not want to be a victim, but she does not want to be a predator anymore, and so that's it's scary that there's only one or the other option for her. We see in the 2 attacks by Trevor Herbert and Julia Montauk on the Institute, they threaten to shake her back towards the hunt, the second attack eventually succeeding in doing that. And Basira and John, prior to that, argue whether she should let herself be consumed again and survive, or resist and die from it. And that's sort of like an interesting conversation that is being had of, like, if you were consumed by these entities, would you let yourself be consumed so that you can survive? Or would you stop it to be, like, ethically stop being bad and die from it? You know, that's a very interesting concept, and they grapple about it throughout the season after Daisy gets saved. And that's just very interesting to listen to listen to their arguments about that. Daisy and John also, very interestingly, how many times do I say interesting here? Whatever. Daisy and John also begin to forge a new friendship between them, which is very fun to watch, to listen to. And it shows how these people are, if they feel very real because of this friendship now. Because I remember John says that he started listening to a band because of Daisy, and he said he hated the band, but it's nice to hate something that doesn't hate him back or doesn't want to kill him. And so it feels very much like characters that are trying to separate themselves from the horrors of the world, but still work within that world itself, which is very interesting. Everything that happens with Daisy in season 5 is sad, fits with the story, but I think Daisy and Basira are at their 100% best in season 4. Along with Melanie, along with Martin, along with John, along with every single character that is there. Because what? Season 4 is amazing. So there are some statements that I wanted to talk about before I get to the finale, because they couldn't really fit in any of the story points that were above, but I just wanted to talk about them because they were good, interesting statements. So the first one I wanted to talk about is 121 Far Away. The very first episode of season 4 is really good. One thing I forgot to mention is that my best friend got me into listening to this show, and one of the things she showed me before I started watching this show was she showed me Oliver Banks and how his cause of death on the wiki is listed as satellite impact (parentheses he got better), which is really funny to me. Which is a really an inside joke between her and I multiple times where we talk about someone got hurt but they got better. Far Away is a really good episode because it comes off of what I think is the weakest episode in the entire series, which is 120 Eye Contact. I tried listening to it multiple times. I just couldn't get into it. So that's just my opinion. And of course, this episode is about Oliver Banks, who's trying to get away from the tentacles that he sees in his dreams that show how people die. He goes to Point Nemo, which is the farthest point from anybody, and he says that the Point Nemo is where satellites go to die because no one's going to be there. And so he hitchhikes a boat and goes to Point Nemo, and he's like, I want to sleep. He just wants to sleep. This man just wants to sleep peacefully and not dream about death. And then a satellite falls from the sky and kills everyone on the ship, which I love because it just toes the line between absurdity and horror and realism. What are the chances that a satellite falls from the sky and crushes your ship? What are the chances that a ship is going to Point Nemo? What are the chances of all of that happening? Of course it happens in Magnus Archives. When I first heard about that he died by satellite impact, but he got better, I thought it was connected to the Daedalus, but it's not. But honestly, would I be wrong in assuming that? Anyways, I just really like this one, and this is one of my favorite episodes that's based on the end. So I just think it's neat. I just think it's neat. In 124 Left Hanging, that episode, love me some Simon Fairchild showing up. I love a Simon Fairchild Wild Shiny encounter. Old man that does not sound like an old man. I love Simon Fairchild. I don't care about him, but I just love him a lot. He's just neat. He's just neat. This episode is a good example of how horror doesn't need to be explained. I still don't know what that gray arm that reaches into that cable car and snatches that man out. And the fact that I don't know what that is still terrifying despite not knowing what it is. And it also almost sort of solidifies the Vast as something scary to me. And I say almost because that happened in 21 Freefall back in season 1. A man gets eaten by the sky. Hello? Terrifying. But no, Left Hanging is a really good episode. And Simon Fairchild is a really neat guy. I don't give a crap about him, but he's so cool. 148 Extended Surveillance. It's not this. So this one's not a favorite of mine. This episode helped show how scary the Eye can be because honestly, if I look back, most of the statements of the Eye are surrounding Albrecht von Closen, Albrecht von Closen, and Jonah Magnus, and they're kind of boring to me in a way. And besides 53 Crusader and 60 Observer Effect, statements for the Eye tend to not be that scary for me. But this one was pretty scary. Also, I'd wager to say that this is a mixture of the Eye and the Extinction. Because with the security guard becoming part of the surveillance system, What happened to him? Oh, he's inside the technology, and the extinction deals with technology preceding humans, and that's just kind of what I get. The wiki doesn't say anything about that. That's just sort of like the idea that I have. Extended surveillance, that's like somewhat extinction-y, you know? But I just want to mention that episode because it was pretty interesting. 150, cul-de-sac. Not one of my favorites. Pretty good. Not one of my favorites. A man gets lost in like an endless suburbia. I first thought that this was connected to The Spiral, because it was very similar to 47, The New Door, and Michael / Helen's Corridors. But the wiki said it's connected to The Lonely, and like after a second listen, I get it, but I mean I agree, but it's like I got like being lost and not knowing where you are more than being alone, you know? Either way, I like it a lot. It's very similar to the movie Vivarium, where a couple is trapped in rows of unending suburbia as well. Different things happen in that movie as well too. So which is why I was confused, and it just stuck out to me. It just stuck out to me. I like it a lot. It's not my favorite. 153 love bombing is a really fun statement, because so this statement introduces the third named cult in the Magnus Archives, which is the Divine Chain, and also introduces the concept that the corruption has ties to unhealthy love, companionship, and obsession. Also interesting to note that there is a 50 episode gap, according to the wiki, of an episode that primarily dealt with the corruption. And that last episode was 102, Nesting Instinct, with the French beetle lover. Which, I don't know, it's just interesting to point out that that's like, it's like 50 episodes since the like most recent corruption centered episode. Just wanted to mention that. And so I saw this idea on Tumblr, which I like it a lot. I'm stealing the idea from Tumblr. That the concept of love being tied to corruption makes the lonely the corruption's counter. So with the corruption, say, if we look at, say, Jane Prentice, bugs started burrowing into her skin, and she's like, I need to itch. I love it here. I hate it all, but I love it. You know, all that. Where it's like, the corruption is, things are always there. You know, and that feels terrifying, you know, that you will never be left alone by these things that dig into you. And the lonely is there's nothing ever there. You are always alone. There is nothing ever going to be touching you. I think that's interesting. I'm stealing that from Tumblr. I don't know. I don't remember. I could not find the post that said that, but I'm putting it out there. If you know who it is, let me know so I can follow on Tumblr. I really liked love bombing a lot. The statement. Anyways. And then 157, Rotten Core, I guess they were like, hey, we haven't done corruption in a while. Let's, like, load it up a bit more. So, 4 episodes after love bombing, we got Rotten Core. I think I've mentioned it prior, but I just wanted to highlight it as the end of John Amherst and Adelard Decker. John Amherst being a character that I did not remember at all my first go around. I did not know that John Amherst was the same person in that nursing home, or the same person in the Tale of the Field Hospital, or where else was he in? He was in something else. He was something with Jordan Kennedy, I know that. I just didn't remember her at all. Very nothing character to me. That was his death. Rotten Core is his death. But it is also the end of Adelard Decker, who I 100% remember being the sexiest person in Magnus Archives. Like, Adelard Decker could get it if he didn't die. But he's dead now. Spoiler alert. Rip in peace, my guy. You did good. I like Allard Deckard a lot, and I wonder if we're getting anything from him concerning him in Magnus Protocol. I kind of wish so, I kind of don't wish so, but either way. Rip in peace, my guy. Okay, so the last part of why I enjoy season 4 is the finale, The Eye Opens, 160. I think just overall, before I get into it, season 4 is heavily consistent. There are not many episodes that I write off in season 4. No, there are not many episodes in the entirety of the Magnus Archives that I write off. Most of them, honestly, are in season 5. Some of them are in season 1 and 3. It's spread out. Season 4, almost no duds. The only dud is Remains to be Seen. I forget the number of it. It's kind of forgettable to me. It deals with how Von Closen dies. And I'm like, okay. That's another I statement. But nearly every single episode in season 4, spot on, amazing, beautiful, stunning, not afraid to be referenced, beautiful. The only episodes in season 4 that I just don't really like are 127, Remains to be Seen, 140, The Movement of the Heavens. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, all of them are really, really good and just consistent throughout. Would I place any of these in an S tier ranking style? I think Entombed, Dead Horse, Nemesis, Civilian Casualties are on that S tier. Everything else A tier. A tier. Love Bombing A tier. Sorry, Love Bombing S tier. Gravediggers S tier. Everything else A tier, honestly. So yeah, it's just season 4 is just heavily consistent throughout, and I just really enjoy it because of that. I think the crowning achievement of season 4 is having such a consistent showing and finding a way to wrap it all up in something satisfying. Because that's a hard thing to do. How do you follow up 40 amazing episodes back to back? How do you end that? How do you move on to a season 5? What is season 5? And I think The Eye Opens is an amazing episode because of that. So we're coming off of John saving Martin from the Lonely, which mirrors John saving Daisy from the Buried. We witness the intense and meticulous planning that Johnny Sims, the writer, went through to write this story. I don't remember which Q&A I heard this in, but Johnny Sims had stated that he doesn't enjoy a story that doesn't have a predestined ending. A story needs to have an ending. And when you're writing a story, you need to be writing towards that ending. If you don't have an ending, you don't have a focal point, and you don't have a way to focus your storytelling. And I think that Johnny Sims knows this. Johnny Sims writes this way. I want to emulate this writing. I want to dig into Johnny Sims' brain and pull out what is inside that brain so I can have it, please. Period. And so, to me, this idea that you have to have a story's end from its inception is plainly seen in season 4. Because I believe he also, he knew that he wanted to get to the apocalypse. So how do you get there? This is how you get there. And that's sort of the focus sort of writing that's really important. So John's beholding powers, along with what was shown in Weaver, with John not being able to stop himself from reading a statement. Once he starts a statement, he can't stop. That is just perfect foreshadowing for this episode. We're seeing how powerful John is becoming. We're seeing how capable he is. We're seeing how in control he is and out of control. Because he has to consume other statements to be alive. And once he starts a statement, once he reads a statement, he can't let go. Season 4 finale, the eye opens, starts with him reading a statement that's like, well, they're in, Martin and John, who are in love with each other, are in Scotland. And he starts reading a statement that Basir had given him, quote, or like Basir had given Martin because Basir found them or whatever, and he, and as mentioned before, there was this resounding feeling of things being tied up and finished. Agnes's storyline, the rituals, even with the extinction and it being shown that, oh no, it was just to manipulate Martin, there was just a resounding feeling of an end, or at least a progression towards something else. And lo and behold, this episode was that. The question of how rituals fail answered here and in 158, the Panopticon, with Gertrude's hypothesis and trial of not attempting to stop the extinguished sun. Jonah Magnus also doing the Watcher's Crown and learning that it just won't work. Is just really interesting sort of writing. With the current reveal in the Panopticon that Elias is just Jonah Magnus. It's just a lot of information happening at the same time. And we were like, oh my god, cool. We stopped whatever was happening with Jonah. We saved Martin. Martin and John are now in love with each other in Scotland, in a cabin, being all domestic with each other. And then John is about to read a statement, and it's Elias. And it was terrifying to hear. It's become a meme now on TikTok. I believe it's hello John, I'm sorry for the deception. After all that information, I thought it sort of ended there, and we're going to get some sort of a small conclusion and sort of like wrap it up, sort of what happened with season 2's finale with brutal pipe murder and 120. Honestly, most of the finales for Magnus Archives don't hit that hard, because brutal pipe murder is only fun because I don't like Jürgen Leitner. I'll talk about Jürgen Leitner some other time. The finales weren't hitting that hard, honestly. Like brutal pipe murder and 120. I forget the name of it. It's that forgettable for me. We get to 160 and we're like expecting this sort of thing, a small recap of something or whatever. And I'm trying to remember how it felt to listen to this for the first time, and even yet it's still chilling to think about. To have Elias/Jonah reveal that all of the events that have transpired has been through his pushing, and because of his and Gertrude's conclusion that the rituals cannot succeed without bringing in all of them, to bring upon a ritual that brings in all the fears and hits off the apocalypse in season 5. That is of course that would happen. Of course that's a thing that they would think about, It's stunning. And I even remember thinking around season 3 when I was listening to it, I wonder if Johnny Sims is going to manage to write large story points for all the entities. Because by season 3, we had the corruption in season 1, the spiral with Michael, and the stranger, of course, with the unknowing and not Sasha. With all of those happening, those were big story plots. Yeah, we had every other entity like interspersed, but nothing like giant like that. And by season 4, we had the buried with the coffin, and then with the dark with the black sun. But since we only got like desperate elements for the desolation and Agnes Montague and everything, it was all very much like, okay, so those are some main story elements. Are we going to get to all 14? Because honestly, I would feel robbed if I didn't get all 14 represented in big giant story elements in Magnus Archives. And then I was like, okay, we have 2 seasons left after season 3. We might be able to fit all of them into the last 3 seasons. But sort of like in the background, we also heard the very small, nearly inconsequential moments that happened prior, where John was marked by the web, the spider book when he was a child, the Vasta Hunt and Desolation. You know, I hadn't really understood that Melanie was connected to the slaughter the first time around, so that was a surprise. Of course, with John's coma, obviously it's connected enough for the end. So, like, John's rip to get out of the buried marked him for the flesh and finally saving Martin from the lonely. Having those, like, larger story elements interspersed with the smaller tiny ones that still mattered as much as those larger story elements was just really, really cool to see that, you know, to have all 14 fears represented in story elements. Just that just affects the future. Like, that is just amazing writing, amazing planning, meticulous planning to set that all up in a way that makes sense too, you know, in a way that is surprising but not subverting, you know. Like, it would feel robbed if we were like, oh, the slaughter, I don't know, was just there or something. I don't know. It was the moments that happened had equal weight despite unequal representation, and that is sometimes maybe flawed, but the way that it was executed was very, very smart and very, very good and very exciting and terrifying to hear and terrifying to listen to that as I'm riding my bike, this ritual occurring, you know. It's amazing writing. And the ritual itself, the writing, the ritual itself to summon all the fears haunts me to this day, and I will quote it right now because I wrote it down. Bring all that is fear and all that is terror and all that is the awful dread that crawls and chokes and blinds and falls and twists and leaves and hides and weaves and burns and hunts and rips and bleeds and dies. How do you recover from that? Honestly? How do you read that and not think, oh my god, this is the best thing out there? Okay, not the best thing, but one of the best things out there. An amazing fucking story, amazing writing, an amazing story written, just amazing all throughout. To have it all boil down to this one moment, all 159 episodes prior, boil down to this one moment that causes the apocalypse. Oh my god. It was just amazing to witness. And then it all just goes downhill from there. No. I like season 5. Season 5 is fine. It's not my favorite. It's fine. But season 4 really set a standard for horror for me. It really set a standard for storytelling. It really set a standard for how you can craft a story that builds upon itself, surprises, yet does not undermine itself with those surprises, subverts, but isn't unexpected. It's just amazing writing, and I wish to write something that makes me feel this way, you know? So, yeah, season 4, just amazing. Final thoughts. As you can see, I made a video about this, and I have made this is the first video I've ever made, and I don't know if I'm gonna make more, but if it's about Magnus Archives, I probably will write more about the Magnus Archives because I absolutely adore the Magnus Archives. So, I love horror, I love writing, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to me rant about this, because I absolutely think that everyone should listen to the Magnus Archives and experience what I experienced, because it is absolutely beautiful. I kind of want to do this thing where I show my favorite. If I do this thing where I like talk about each season retrospectively, I want to talk about which entity episode I enjoyed most for that entity. Does that make sense? Whatever. My favorite episodes for each entity are, in no particular order, just the order that I wrote them down. For the flesh, it is 130 meat. For the hunt, it is 133 dead horse. For the lonely, it is 150 cul-de-sac. In the stranger, it is 122 zombie. For the buried is 132 entombed. For the corruption, it is 153 love bombing. For the dark, it is 135 dark matter. For the spiral, it is 126 sculptor's tool. For the eye, it is 148 extended surveillance. For the desolation, it is 139 chosen. For the vast, it is 124 left hanging. For the web, it is 123 web development. For the slaughter, 125 civilian casualties. And the end, 121 far away. Thank you very much if you got this far. I don't know how long this is going to be until I actually edit this. And yeah, I had a lot of fun writing this, and I had a lot of fun filming this, honestly. So I kind of want to continue this because I'm having this gap year. And I got to talk about the Magnus Archives uninterrupted. Great. Thank you for listening, for watching.